Welcome to the video today. It's a teaching video today. We're going to be doing an 8x10, which is pretty small acrylic painting in classic style of a river in early springtime. Like I said, classic acrylic painting. And I like to start these videos out with a little bit of action from the place that we're actually painting. I come back and I paint in the studio, but I spend a lot of time outside. I have been a plein air painter in the past, but acrylic painting is a little hard to control outside sometimes. And I went down to the river, as you can see, and I looked up the river. I was standing right there, and this was the scene. So I thought, well, you can't beat this. So I'm going to start out with showing my drawing. I'm going to put it up in corners so you can continue to see most of the painting. I put an X right there because that's where I want to focus in on. That's the crux of the river there. You can see me just putting the river in its place here. And that line I brought up there will give me my basis where to build everything else off. I'm putting that edge of the bank real rough. Obviously, you know, this is going to be a real loose painting, and I'm just blocking in areas and giving a little bit of feel for what they are. And surprisingly, by the time I'm done with this painting, these little marks, a lot of them show through in the background if you look real close at the painting. I'm drawing that mountaintop. As you can see, I'm not real concerned about exact shapes. I'll probably modify that shape as the painting goes along, but I'm just getting things in their places. There's a big tree that's behind the painting right now that I'm using. You can see there, I started out using that, and then I just put those other trees in, and you'll see here everything kind of came up. And now I use, instead of alizarin crimson for a lot of these paintings, a lot of painters use alizarin crimson. I like to use something called Venetian red. It's a little warmer. It's kind of got an orangey tone to it. And I just block in those shapes, let it drag around a little bit, obviously loose. And then I went to raw sienna, which is kind of like a yellow ochre, but usually the sienna is a little bit more transparent than yellow ochre. Yellow ochre usually has a kind of an opacity to it, and raw sienna is the same color, but it's usually a little more transparent. So I like that on the early stages, especially in a river, because there's always that kind of golden tone in the stones there in the river. So I'm blocking that in. I like to flash back to this scene. It's pretty soothing. Now I'll move my painting over into this corner because I want to block in those trees, so you can kind of compare what I'm doing to the trees. And I'll start out with real dark. And this painting, believe it or not, really only has 3 colors in it. This is mostly phthalo blue with a little bit of that raw sienna dabbed in it to give it that dark green flavor. And as you can see, there's those trees, the shadows in there are almost black in reality. And you never really want to use black if you're a student of Monet. Although Renoir touted black. So it's just a matter of opinion a lot of times. I do know that black a lot of times makes a painting subliminally dark when you're finished. So I just keep sort of blocking these dark shapes in, obviously real loose. These 2 trees are the same height there. You think it kind of bends down, but then those 2 are almost twins. And I'm going to use that same tone. It's nice to carry tones around the painting. It kind of gives a unity to everything. And that green tone that's kind of washed out of my brush a little bit, I'll just drag it into that river scene and start creating some watery feeling in the river. Watery feeling in the river is always good. Sorry. And there's the trees that are down at the end across the corner. And then those branches that are kind of coming in, with the sort of played out brush, not much dark color in it, I'm using that to sort of fill in those sort of transparent branches up there. And just smear around some color into those back areas that I can build off of. And I'll come back in with, I just basically put some white into my mixture of phthalo blue and raw sienna so that what I'm putting on here has a little more opacity, but then I'm also creating some edges where the dark color stays and a little lighter color starts to take over. It's actually more green. I'll come back in, obviously I'm not done with anything. Come back in later. But this way I kind of get that in there and sort of get rid of some of those red lines behind there with some more opacity. Flashing back to the nice river scene. Now back up here where you can watch what I'm doing again. There's that kind of gray bank. Really just my three colors, my rust red and my green tone, which is the phthalo blue, and the raw sienna with some white is my gray. And then I get out the fine brush to start to work in some lines. I'll create some edges now, and now at this point you create edges. I say this all the time. You create edges and then you knock them back down, and you recreate them again with your next level, and that way the edges build up and have a life. That's another favorite saying of mine in a painting, is having a life. And put a little bit of red, rust red. Now that mountain looks more gray in the photograph that we're looking at, but when I'm standing there, that mountain was really a reddish toned rock. And I'll darken it down a little bit, but now I'm coming in with the green to signify that there are trees up in there. Obviously I'm not wanting to paint any individual trees. I just want to give the impression that there's a little slope there and there's pine trees on it. I sort of rubbed out some of the real thick paint. I didn't want to come back in there with something real strong, so I smushed it onto my easel. As you can see, I do that a lot. Now here's a little, I lightened up that green tone again, and I'll continue to build up the water, leaving some of those darks. I want that yellow ochre or raw sienna to come through. I want to leave some of that for the very final even. And so here I am just dragging some sort of gray, kind of a khaki gray tone around. And we go back to that nice river scene. And now we do that nice Colorado blue sky. Tops of the sky is always dark and the horizon is always light. And I like to mix skies on the canvas. I don't like to have a big block of blue. I like to make them dynamic, leave things happening. I think that was what the Impressionists learned. Although I believe that even before the Impressionists, there were guys painting as Impressionists. Frankly, I think Rembrandt was the forefather of Impressionism. His landscapes late in his life were real loose. And I think Van Gogh saw that because he was Dutch and had probably worshipped Rembrandt in a way, and so he saw what Rembrandt was starting to do. And that was a couple hundred years before the Impressionists. So there's been a lot of guys. As you can see with the blue, I sort of fixed the top of the mountain. It's behind my hand now, but I made it a little more exact to the shape that's up there. Still not exact. Now as you see, I've got this dark blue going, and yeah, it's actually a little bit darker, and that's because I'm going to go one more time with a lighter tone over it. Here we go. This is almost just pure white I'm putting on here. And then what happens is the wet blue that's down turns that white into a light blue. Paint around a little bit, paint around a little bit. I'm trying to catch that energy. If you just look up at that blue sky in the video, you think, wow, that's just flat, pure blue. But when you're there, I don't know what it is. I hate to get too romantic, but it's speaking something to you. It's moving. It's alive, and the only way to really portray that in paint is to give it motion when you're painting. I left a lot of this in here so you can sort of see what's going on with it all. I think it was my favorite part of the painting. Some of the details will make the painting come alive at the end, but I think this the shapes of the trees and the hillside against the sky is what is the real power of this painting. So I had fun doing this. Now we'll move on. Another little shot of that stream. There's no way you can approximate that, but I want to remind myself and the viewer of this, what these rivers are like in the best way that I can, and simplifying it. Now you can see in that river, and it blends in and turns kind of gray, but if you look at those little individual spots in the area that I'm painting now, it's sky blue in there. It's moving, and so it blurs, and it sort of becomes gray, but those little spots are really quite blue. And then there's little touches where things catch over here, and the cups of those waves catch that sky for just an instant. When it's all moving, it becomes a blur of all the colors to a degree. But your brain is so quick, your mind is taking little snapshots, and so the impression that there is quite a bit different than what a video can capture. I think that's what video and photography can't really do that our brains are doing, is the speed of the computer we have in our mind. It picks up so many little things that we are unaware of. Now I've got a nice kind of dry brush with that blue in it, so I'm gonna drag it into some areas that need a shadowy feel, and blue is always the way to capture a shadowy feel, having to do with our subliminal impressions again. Now I probably overdid that quite a bit, so I'll have to come back in. There's some gray to tone back that blue. And I think I'm gonna have to do the red again, yeah. I've got the small brush again to create some lines that I've pretty much knocked out again. I like a long, skinny brush for my small work. It carries a lot of paint. You're not going back and forth to the palette the whole time. I zoomed in on this so you can kind of see how I just sort of wash around with that brush, creating little wave tops. And these will be the dark wave tops. I might move again now and work back into the trees. Yeah. Now here you can see basically I've just taken that same tone of green and I added a little bit more of the raw sienna to the blue and then a lot of white. And I get this nice sunlit evergreen where it's hitting the sunny side boughs. This tall one's got a real dark side, but the one side's got some nice light on it. That works out pretty nice. And I'll come into this guy. This tree has mostly sunlit, just by the way it's built, evidently. So I'll spread it all around. That guy there, he's really in the shadows, but I don't think if I just left it the way it was, people wouldn't believe it. It needs to have some of that action to break it up. I think I'll leave it darker and brighten this one up a little bit more, but you can never quite go with what's there when you're creating an impression like this, because it, unlike a photograph, it is instantly believable. An impression needs to be believable because people know that it's not the real thing. And I'll finish up with some background that looks like the valley coming down. I'll show you some close-ups of the finished painting coming up here. We were taking so long, I went ahead and just did the white of the river. It was getting too long, so this will show you the white areas that I put in, and you can see that I just did that like I did those other waves. Here's another little thing, and then I'm going to do a test after this showing my signature, where I'm just going to turn off all the sound and let you hear the river. Did the painting pass the test? Did the image give you the feeling with the sound? That's my real test. I think it was a pretty cool little painting. Thanks for watching. And I always show me my old self bumbling back up out of the river. The snow is all gone now. I took this video a few weeks ago here in Colorado. Thanks again for watching me paint. My website's mahoneyart.com. I have a lot of other paintings. I'm a real experimenter. Check it out. It's kind of interesting. You even have stuff for sale there.